To say that heads are exploding over the nomination of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General is kind of an understatement. No, really, there's gray matter everywhere, and we're going to show you every delicious moment of it coming up. Also, is it possible that J.D. Vance has actually emerged from the presidential election as the most popular politician on any of the national tickets? Well, the data says yes, and we'll explain all of that to you. Also, just breaking moments ago, the FBI raided the home of the owner and founder of Polymarket. What's going on there, and why is the FBI flexing its muscle before the inauguration next month? We have an idea as to why, and the answer rhymes with Cash Patel. We'll lay that out for you and explain coming up in a moment. And the governor of Illinois wants to defy U.S. law and protect non-citizens living in his state at the expense of you, the tax-paying legal U.S. citizen. That doesn't quite seem right. Oh, and finally, the real loser in the election last week, that would be the mainstream corporate legacy media. We've got new data that shows you that MSNBC and CNN, they've got the sads, and we've got the glads. My name's Larry O'Connor. We're brought to you by Birch Gold, and my name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. You could just hear we've got a lot to get to, and I want to get to it immediately. But first, as I mentioned, we're brought to you by Birch Gold. And for those of us holding our breath for the past several months, well, we can now exhale, right? Take that deep breath, our side one. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing. And one of the most significant is our national debt. The fact is, our country is broke. And that debt is a house of cards that can't quickly be dismantled. So the strategy remains the same now for you personally. Diversify your savings. So many things are out of our control, even out of President Trump's control, frankly. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group, they'll help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA of physical gold. And the best news is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Text my name, Larry, Larry, to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. And right now, listen to this offer. Right now, between now and Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, you're going to get a free 1-ounce Silver Eagle for every $5,000 purchased. Diversify your savings with Birch Gold. Text Larry, Larry, to 989898. Claim your eligibility for free silver today. It was late yesterday afternoon when President Trump announced on press release via Truth Social that his nominee for Attorney General of the United States to head the Department of Justice would be none other than Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. And well, the news was not roundly accepted in many circles in Washington, D.C. Let's take a look at how they're taking it over on our favorite cable news network, MSNBC.
Well, Julie, let's talk about some of the picks that you just ran through. Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth. Do you think that they are confirmable at this point? What's the buzz on the Hill right now?
Well, I mean, I hope you don't forgive me for saying this, Kristen, but the general vibe on the Hill right now is WTF. People are shocked at the news of Gaetz, especially. I feel like I couldn't even get around to getting reaction on Tulsi Gabbard when this pick of Gaetz came down the pike. Senators, Republican lawmakers, even one of them in a closed-door meeting said, oh, my God, when they saw the post from Donald Trump. Several senators, I just ran into Lindsey Graham, for example, who kind of brushed me off and said he didn't speak to Trump yet. We'll see, he said, if Gaetz is confirmable, if he's a good pick. Chuck Grassley, who's going to be the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee, working very closely with the next Attorney General. He really didn't have anything to say. He stood there for 30 seconds, just completely baffled when reporters told him about this. Others like Collins, Murkowski, those who are seen to deflect from whatever Trump tries to do, their press handlers basically pushing us aside. And it is because look at who Gaetz is. He's currently under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for some of these personal misgivings that he's been a part of, some of the things that the federal government has investigated him on and later dropped charges on. He is still very much being investigated by that House committee. Bipartisan sentiment across the aisle is they really can't believe that Gaetz is the one who ended up with this top job. And the question of if he's confirmable, well, you talk about all these picks. This really is the biggest test between Senate Republicans and Trump, and a test of their allyship to him, too.
It sure is, Julie. It's well put.
Yeah, well put, Julie. Julie, who began by saying that the reaction on Capitol Hill is WTF. By the way, for those of you who playing at home and can't spell, WTF stands for what the. Let me explain to you about what's really going on here. We've got a lot of reaction to go through, and at the end, I will explain exactly to all of you and to our friends over on MSC. I will explain the actual. But you've got to wait until the end to get that. But before I do, I just want you to remember one thing that you just heard in that report, that Matt Gaetz had just finished a investigation at the hands of the House Ethics Committee that began after the Justice Department investigated him and then dropped the charges. Remember that. Put a pin in it, as the kids say. Matt Gaetz, Congressman of Florida, was investigated by the Justice Department. Then that investigation was dropped. House Ethics Committee picked up the investigation. Remember that as we go through all these reactions, and then I will explain the aforementioned actual. Meanwhile, if you're at MSNBC and you're trying to make sense of it all, who do you turn to? Well, of course, you turn to one of your top reporters in Washington, D.C., who spent several years of the first Trump administration pushing the lie and scam that was the Russian collusion hoax, because he knows everything. This guy does. Why isn't he fired? Oh, no. He's an employee in good standing. He's Ken Delinian at NBC News.
Hearing from people inside the DOJ right now about what this Gaetz pick would mean for the future of the department.
They are absolutely horrified, Anna, and that's not an exaggeration. And they're not speaking by name, but I'll just tell you that John Bolton, who's one of the most conservative figures in Washington, who served as Donald Trump's national security advisor, just said in the last hour that this is the worst nomination for a cabinet post in American history. And that's not hyperbole. He legitimately believes that. People are horrified because, as you said, the Attorney General is not only the most important legal job in the United States, it's a very important national security job. I think this is getting a little bit lost, particularly post 9/11. The Attorney General sees the most sensitive intelligence in the government, much of the same intelligence that the president sees. He or she oversees very sensitive, secret counterintelligence investigations, counterterrorism operations, signs off on things that the intelligence agencies are doing, negotiates with the tech companies about how the NSA is accessing data. It's just mind-boggling, and it takes up much of the Attorney General's portfolio, that national security part of it that we don't usually see because much of it is secret. And it's an incredible responsibility, and Matt Gaetz just doesn't have anything in his resume that would suggest he's prepared for that. And then you have this other side where he's threatening to blow up the department and has accused it of being corrupt. And he actually has said he believes that Merrick Garland has ordered the FBI to investigate Joe Biden's political opponents. If you believe that, then you might believe that you can do the same thing as Attorney General. That's not what happened, but Matt Gaetz appears to believe it. And there's a real fear inside the Justice Department that he or people like him would order investigations where there was no predicate, where there was no crime, and that's going to force some career people to make some really hard choices on it.
Yes, people are horrified. I mean, can you imagine actually thinking that Merrick Garland used the Justice Department to investigate Joe Biden's political opponents? I mean, next thing you'll do is tell me that Merrick Garland used the Justice Department to investigate Catholics for going to Latin Mass, or parents for going to school board meetings who were angry about their curriculum or perhaps social distancing policies, and they were investigated as domestic terrorists. I mean, next thing you'll tell me is that Merrick Garland coordinated with local DAs in Manhattan and Atlanta to trump up charges against Donald Trump to keep him from running for president. I mean, who would believe anything like that? And of course, don't forget the national security component that the Justice Department is in charge of. The Attorney General has to sign off on very sensitive things like spying warrants and FISA warrants on members of the Trump campaign because they were involved in Russian collusion. And you've got to have major credentials to be able to sign off on such important things like that. People are losing their minds about this in Washington, D.C., because in the intelligence community, they won't be able to just do whatever the hell they want under the guise of national security, because they won't have an Attorney General who signs off and rubber stamps everything that they demand. Wow, Ken, that's some great reporting there. I feel convinced. Don't you? John Cornyn, senator from Texas, who just came off a humiliating defeat from Majority Leader. He now has no role at all in the leadership of the Republican Party in the Senate. He was asked about Congressman Gaetz, and, well, he wants to know exactly what Congressman Gaetz is guilty of. It's basically what he said.
Be talking about recess.
On the issue of vetting, though, how critical is it then to have access to what the House Ethics Committee has found in their investigation?
I think there should not be any limitation on the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation, including whatever the House Ethics Committee has generated.
So you want to see it?
So he wants to see the fruits of the House Ethics Committee investigation into Matt Gaetz, an investigation that will now be dropped because Matt Gaetz has resigned from Congress. And so there's no reason for the Ethics Committee to conduct or reveal an investigation into a person who is no longer a member of the House. But why can't we see the results of that investigation? After all, the House Ethics Committee is part of law enforcement and follows regular due process rules to investigate somebody, right? Oh, no, actually, they're not. That's not at all what they do. That's not part of due process, and it's not part of the Justice Department. I remind you, of course, that the House Ethics Committee investigation into Congressman Gaetz was only began because the Justice Department began an investigation into the congressman and then dropped their investigation. But that doesn't matter. These reporters and this senator demand to see what they found, no matter what it is, no matter whether there was any defense put forth, no matter whether Matt Gaetz was given due process during that investigation. It doesn't matter. We demand to see what was found. And it was only investigated because the Justice Department investigated Matt Gaetz and then dropped charges. Are you seeing where I'm going here? Yeah. Just wait. We've got more reaction, and then I'll tell you again. I'll answer the burning question everyone asking on Capitol Hill when they saw Matt Gaetz was nominated for Attorney General. They were all asking, apparently, what the and I'm going to explain to you the actual in a moment. More reaction? Sure, absolutely, we've got more reaction. How about J.D. Vance chiming in after he saw the circus that was unfolding last night? He said the main issue with Matt Gaetz is that he used his office to prosecute his political opponents and authorize federal agents to harass parents who were peacefully protesting at school board meetings. Oh, no, wait, that's actually Merrick Garland, the current Attorney General. J.D. Vance, kind of stealing part of my delivery here, but I don't mind. Senior Trump advisor is quoted saying Trump is going to bring in somebody who is going to burn down the DOJ from the inside, and Matt is going to do that. Conservatives believe the DOJ is in chaos. You starting to figure out exactly what's going on here? The pieces of the puzzle are being put together. I'm sure you can start to see the image. Our friend Sean Davis, he's the co-founder of The Federalist, said it in no uncertain terms, and he didn't mince words. Let's read along together. Every swamp rat crying about Gaetz didn't lift a finger while DOJ was running illegal coup after illegal coup against our elected government from 2016 to 2020. They didn't say a word when DOJ illegally seized the phones of Representative Scott Perry or Representative Andy Ogles. They were quiet as a church mouse when DOJ illegally spied on Trump. They were nowhere to be found when DOJ hatched and ran the entire fake kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer. They did nothing when DOJ allowed violent threats against Supreme Court justices to continue. And don't even get me started on the paralysis regarding the insane DOJ J6 op. So to everyone in Washington crying about Matt Gaetz, you are the reason he is necessary. Understand that it is happening because of your own fecklessness or complicity. You did nothing while the infection festered and the cancer spread at DOJ. You looked the other way as it nearly destroyed the country. And now you wonder why emergency medicine is necessary? So as you cry at Capitol Grill over expensive wine bought for you by your corrupt K Street donors, just know that all of this is your fault and that it's not going to stop until the problems you deliberately ignored are finally solved. Sean Davis, boys and girls, at The Federalist. Congressman Tom Massey of Kentucky was chased down by a reporter and asked about Matt Gaetz and whether he can be confirmed or not, considering potential opposition over in the Senate chambers. And, well, he summed it up rather succinctly.
He's the Attorney General. Suck it up.
I don't know if you could hear him or not, so I'll quote him. He said, recess appointment. He'll be appointed via recess appointment. Suck it up. Now, a recess appointment is what happens if Congress is in recess and the president makes an appointment. The person automatically fills the job during that recess until and when they can have the opportunity to actually be approved by the Senate. It happens all the time. It very rarely happens right at the beginning of an administration. So we'll see how it's employed in this case. Jack Posobiec over at Human Events just reminded everybody of the vote count for Merrick Garland when he was appointed as Attorney General. during the first month of the Biden administration. He got 70 yays and 30 nays. That means he got approximately 20 Republicans voting for him. 20 Republicans crossed the aisle and put Merrick Garland in place. And we've seen how Merrick Garland has conducted himself as the Attorney General. Knowing how Merrick Garland has conducted himself, and you're a Republican that voted for him, how can you possibly now withhold your support for Matt Gaetz? It's a good question that the people of those Republican states should be asking their fine senator right now by calling them and telling them how they should vote. Meanwhile, a senator, not one that approved of Merrick Garland, this one would be Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, even though he coached for Auburn. In fact, we prefer Auburn to Alabama, but I don't want to get into that. War Eagle. He spoke on Fox Business about the prospects of the confirmation.
Matt Gaetz get the votes in the Senate?
I don't know. You're finding all the swamp creatures coming out right now. Everybody's got an opinion up here, but at the end of the day, President Trump was elected by an enormous vote, and he deserves a team around him that he wants. It's not us to determine that. We've got 53 votes in the Senate. We can confirm with 51. I've already seen where a couple of them says, I'm not voting for him. Wait a minute. You are not the United States of America. You have one vote in the U.S. Senate. You did not get elected president. Vote with President Trump. This is the last chance we're going to have of saving this country. And if you want to get in the way, fine. But we're going to try to get you out of the Senate, too, if you try to do that.
What parts of Trump's
read between the lines there. You vote against Gaetz. That's fine. We will primary your next time we have the opportunity. Tommy Tuberville, with no uncertain terms. One minor correction, though, you can actually confirm them with 50 votes, not 51. J.D. Vance would be the tiebreaker there. Very important to start drawing lines right now. Senate has advice and consent. They don't have veto power. I mean, technically they do, but they're not supposed to exercise it. They're not supposed to say, well, you know, we'll provide advice and consent, but ultimately we just don't like this guy because he makes us feel icky, so we're going to say no. I want to remind you, 20 Republicans voted for Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland. Let's remind you who Merrick Garland is. Very recently, Merrick Garland had some very important words to say to the American people about the pristine integrity of the Justice Department, and by extension, he himself, the man who led the Justice Department, and about truth, justice, and the American way, and what's out of bounds these days in terms of any criticism of that fair establishment. Let's listen to what he has to say and take it to heart, shall we?
Mr. Attorney General, Republicans in Congress have flirted with the idea of holding the FBI director in contempt. It's become a talking point on the campaign trail, the alleged corruption in the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies. Do the American people have cause to be concerned about the integrity of the components of this Justice Department, and what do you have to say about how they're acting?
I certainly understand that some have chosen to attack the integrity of the Justice Department as components and its employees by claiming that we do not treat like cases alike. This constitutes an attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy and essential to the safety of the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth. You've all heard me say many times that we make our cases based on the facts and the law. These are not just words. These are what we live by. They are the foundation of the way we make these decisions. The agents of the FBI, as well as the DEA, the ATF, our deputy U.S. Marshals, every day, often at great personal risk, protect the American people and secure its safety. Our cases are based on their work. I could not be more proud to work with them.
Well, I'm glad you're proud. Just summarize what he said there. An attack on the Justice Department and the people who work here, and the Attorney General by extension, is an attack on American justice itself. Well, if Matt Gaetz becomes Attorney General, do those words continue to hold true? I mean, any criticism of Matt Gaetz, any attack on what the Attorney General or the Justice Department ends up doing under Attorney General Matt Gaetz, does that mean that you can't attack Matt Gaetz? Does that mean that you can't attack the Justice Department? Otherwise, you're attacking justice itself. It's like Fauci. I represent science, damn it. It's amazing how you put a different character in the costume there and on set. You put Matt Gaetz in that suit, although he'd wear it much better, and have him standing at the podium with the seal of the Department of Justice. And he stands there saying, you attack the Justice Department and you're attacking the Constitution itself and the idea of justice. Well, people would laugh you out of the room. But this clown, he gets away with it because, well, he's on our side, they say. Your NBC News, you've already talked to two of your reporters about this, and they've, of course, confirmed your bias and exactly what you wanted to know. Now, where do you turn? Oh, I've got an idea. How about a guy who was drummed out of the first Trump administration, has become a sworn enemy of Donald Trump, and who, by the way, got his job in the Bush administration with a, say it with me, recess appointment. That's right. John Bolton, who was the ambassador to the United Nations under President George W. Bush, was actually never confirmed by the Senate. He got there via recess appointment. So I think it's fair to ask him about the prospects of Matt Gaetz getting a confirmation that Bolton never actually got.
President-elect Trump intends to nominate Matt Gaetz to run the Department of Justice. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that?
Well, it must be the worst nomination for a cabinet position in American history. I think this is something that falls well outside the scope of deference that should be given to a president in nominating members of his senior team. Gaetz is not only totally incompetent for this job, he doesn't have the character. He is a person of moral turpitude. And notwithstanding how difficult it may be politically, this is a nomination the Republican Party should oppose.
Interesting. Now, John Bolton says this is the worst nomination to a cabinet position in American history. This, of course, could be true considering John Bolton was never nominated for a cabinet position. So I guess we'll never really know. That said, to say that Matt Gaetz is not qualified for the job is fascinating, considering we've just had, Rachel Levine, a gentleman who is unsure about his own actual sex, even though he can look between his legs and see exactly what's dangling there. That person, known as Rachel Levine, has been the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services for the entire Biden administration. Let's not forget the bald, cross-dressing dude who was able to access nuclear secrets as one of the deputies in the the Department of Energy, until he was kicked out because he was arrested for stealing women's luggage so that he could then wear their dresses on the red carpet in Washington, D.C. Oh, and of course, Pete Buttigieg, a man who was the mayor of the fourth largest town in Indiana, who got the job as Secretary of Transportation because, I kid you not, he likes to ride in trains. Yeah, they were all super qualified. Oh, but the Attorney General is very different. You know, the Attorney General, you have to be super qualified to be the Attorney General. Okay. Well, in 1960, John F. Kennedy appointed a 35-year-old man with a law degree to be the Attorney General. He'd never held elected office. He had never been an Attorney General. In fact, that young lawyer at 35 years of age had actually never really tried a case all by himself in court. His main experience in Washington, D.C. was to be the counsel for several committees during the 50s, including the infamous Eugene McCarthy hearings, trying to drum out actual communists who were working in the federal government, although most people think that that committee went a little too far in their zeal to drum out the communists. Yeah, he was the attorney for Eugene McCarthy during the Red Scare. That guy's qualifications, well, the number one qualification for that 35-year-old lawyer to be Attorney General was his last name. It happened to be the same last name as the president. I've just described Robert F. Kennedy, who, of course, is a hero of all swamp creatures in Washington, D.C. Kind of ironic that his son was instrumental in giving Donald Trump the landslide election that he won last week, putting him in a position to be able to name whoever the hell he wants as Attorney General. And that's exactly what he did. Well, what are the senators saying? We've already heard from John Cornyn, one of the Republican senators. How about a Democrat? How about this guy? What's he say?
I mean, I would describe it as God tier level trolling to just trigger a full-on China syndrome to own the libs in perpetuity.
Okay.
I mean, I would just.
Is that what this is? Was it God level trolling to own the libs in perpetuity? Maybe. Some have speculated that this is Donald Trump playing 4D chess again. You know, you have to have some cannon fodder. You got to throw one of them out there that's going to get knocked down. So go ahead and let Gaetz get knocked down so he can do all these other appointments, and they won't, because they don't have the energy in the Senate to go after all of them, like Tulsi and Kristi Noem and whoever else might be coming down the path. Oh, and Pete Hegseth, et cetera, et cetera. That could be true. Or again, speaking about the 4D chess speculation, I've heard this one, that this was a deal with Speaker Johnson that gets Matt Gaetz out of the House so that there's no obstruction to keeping Johnson from becoming the speaker again. But then when Gaetz is not confirmed, he's out of luck. But here's the real kicker. 4D chess remind me now. DeSantis, the governor of Florida, will appoint Gaetz to be the new senator from Florida, thus replacing Marco Rubio, who's now going to the State Department. So that means senators like John Fetterman and the Republicans in the Senate have to make a choice. Do we want to confirm him as Attorney General, or do we then want to work with him as our colleague as the new senator from Florida? Oh my God, we don't want him in the Senate. So let's just throw him to the Justice Department. 4D chess, my friends, 4D chess. I don't think it's any of those things. Let me simplify it for you. First of all, I don't think it's any of those things that I just laid out, because even though everyone loves to say that Donald Trump plays 4D chess, the fact of the matter is, one thing we've learned from Donald Trump over the years is that what you see is what you get. The man does not play games, whether it's 4D chess or anything else for that matter. He does what he wants to do, and he does it because he wants it done. He nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General because Donald Trump wants Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. I reminded you earlier that Matt Gaetz is facing this House Ethics Committee investigation over tawdry claims that he was somehow involved with perhaps an underage young lady, and for one of their dalliances, they crossed state lines, which of course would be a federal crime. Except the federal government, in the auspices of the FBI, under the control of the Justice Department, actually did investigate that. And as I mentioned earlier, they dropped that investigation, which would suggest that no crimes were committed, no laws were broken. And yet we know about that investigation, don't we? Why do we know about that investigation? Why do we, the people, know that Matt Gaetz was investigated by the FBI for such a heinous crime, which, again, apparently he did not commit? We know because the FBI leaked the information about their investigation to the media so that the media could report on the investigation that, again, has been dropped. Matt Gaetz, of course, is innocent until proven guilty, and since this investigation was merely leaked to the media and never actually brought to a court of law, he is 1,000% innocent. And yet you won't hear anybody in Washington, D.C. say that. After all, he's facing a House ethics investigation. See, the House Ethics Committee, they don't follow the same rules of investigation that the FBI or the Justice Department do. They can see the smoke that came from the leak and then, I guess, pursue it and see if there's any fire there. And Lord knows there's probably a lot of tawdry stuff they discovered that still probably doesn't fall under the auspices of a crime. I make that assumption because, may I repeat, the FBI investigated this and dropped the investigation. And the only reason they would drop it is because, in fact, there was no crime. Given all of that, given the fact that the FBI, under the Justice Department, under our current Attorney General Merrick Garland, appointed by Joe Biden, the fact that they did that and leaked it to the media is kind of Exhibit A. All right, let's say it's probably Exhibit R by now, given all the other things we've seen from the Justice Department, but it's a perfect example for those of us who believe that real reforms need to be made at the FBI and the Justice Department. And it'll only happen if somebody has the cojones to actually go in and be a honey badger, to absolutely not give a shit, and go in and actually, with a vengeance, fix what's broken. Because we, the people, we deserve to have a pristine FBI and Justice Department, just like the one that Merrick Garland duplicitously described in his little press conference over there. One that we can feel confident of, that isn't using the law as a political weapon against people, who won't leak tawdry information about an FBI investigation that then gets dropped, but it's out there and people's reputations are destroyed. That's the stuff of nightmares. Why did Donald Trump appoint Matt Gaetz as Attorney General? Well, this is the third person that Donald Trump has had the honor of appointing to the Justice Department. First, it was Senator Sessions. He appointed Senator Sessions as a payback, a reward for Senator Sessions supporting him early on in the presidential campaign of 2016. Then the Russian collusion hoax broke. Sessions recused himself and took a hands-off approach, stepped away, and the thing spread like a wildfire. Then he appointed Bill Barr, who was better than Sessions, but also very disappointing when it came to a lot of the things that were thrown at Donald Trump to try to destroy his presidency and destroy his character. If you ask Donald Trump about his first two Justice Department appointees, he would say the same thing about both of them. He was disappointed because they were weak. Why did he appoint Matt Gaetz? Because he wants someone strong. It's just that simple. And now you know the actual all righty. Let me clear my tabs here, gentlemen, and then we'll get right to it. Well, this just in, and it's a pretty timely story considering we're talking about problems at the Justice Department and the FBI and what a new Attorney General might be able to do to rectify that problem. We are learning that the founder and CEO of Polymarket has been investigated by the FBI. In fact, the CEO's phone has been seized, and many of the electronics in his residence and his work establishment have been seized. And we don't know why exactly. What do we know about Polymarket? Well, Polymarket is the online betting platform that was utilized during this past election, sort of as a bellwether to take the temperature of the American people to see where this election was going. They had a state-by-state Polymarket as well as a national Polymarket. And, well, it was pretty damn accurate. And during the last few months of the presidential election, the data from Polymarket was often quoted side by side with national polls. Polymarket also became very popular with young men, young conservative men, a very critically important voting bloc in this last election. Some would argue the voting bloc that tipped the election in the favor of the Trump-Vance ticket. So now here we are 8 days after the election, and the founder and CEO of Polymarket has his home and his office raided by the FBI with his phone and his electronics seized. It's a hell of a coincidence. Why would the FBI do that? Why would the FBI do that now? Why would the FBI make this move in a lame duck session of this Congress and the Biden presidency as everyone awaits the new administration, the new Justice Department, the new Attorney General, and probably a new FBI director? Why would they be so aggressive and so robust at this moment? Nick Sortor, you probably know him as one of the cast of characters over on Timcast. He's pretty plugged in Washington, D.C., and he's been hearing that the FBI director is about to be named. And as he says, holy crap. The liberal screeching will bust your eardrums. Now, if Matt Gaetz as Attorney General doesn't elicit a holy crap, but the name of the FBI director does, well, I want to know who that person is. There's a lot of rumor and a lot of speculation around Washington. And this morning on Fox and Friends, Lawrence Jones actually relayed what he's hearing about the potential FBI director.
Other name that I'm hearing this morning as well is the next batch of nomination is going to be Attorney General and FBI Director. And I'm hearing Kash Patel. This has not been confirmed. The president has not made a final decision on that, but he wants to clean house there next.
Kash Patel. Who's Kash Patel? Well, first, let's see what detractors and opponents say about Kash Patel. It's always interesting to learn about who somebody is based on who hates them, especially in the realm of politics. So, MSNBC, what do you think of Kash Patel?
Spreading the lie that there is malfeasance in our government, that some mysterious, shadowy deep state is out to get Donald Trump and his supporters poses a grave threat to U.S. national security and, by extension, the American people. We heard that from former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Sue Gordon. She talked about it on this program last week, not because it's some abstract theory out there, but because it is a message that Trump and some of his most extreme allies have been pushing onto the American people repeatedly and for years now. Especially one person named Kash Patel, who, according to reporting from our colleague Von Hilliard, is currently under consideration to be the director of the CIA or the FBI in Donald Trump's second term. It's an interesting development, as we just learned moments ago, that the current director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, also appointed by Donald Trump, as well as people on the Trump team, are planning for the possibility that Trump will replace his first pick to be FBI director during his first term, Christopher Wray. Wray has not finished serving out his 10-year term, and that is according to 3 people familiar with this matter. But to refresh your memory for a minute on the individual named Kash Patel, he's someone Trump wanted to install as deputy director of the CIA at the end of his first term as president. But Gina Haspel, who was running the CIA at the time, said she would quit if he did that. Kash Patel has since written a book called, quote, Government Gangsters, which, as ABC News reports, calls for a, quote, comprehensive house cleaning at the Justice Department and an eradication of government tyranny within the FBI by firing the top ranks and prosecuting to the fullest extent of the law anyone who in any way abused their authority for political ends.
All right, we're going to watch a little bit more of this glorious taking down of Kash Patel, but I just want to pause there for a moment. It's true. It's a great book, by the way, Government Gangsters. And look at this poll quote from the book that MSNBC, apparently, or at least this host, Nicole Wallace, finds so objectionable. Kash Patel says that the top ranks of the FBI should be fired and then prosecute, quote, to the fullest extent of the law, anyone who in any way abused their authority for political ends. They found that objectionable. They find that outrageous. They find that absolutely disqualifying for Kash Patel. How dare you, sir? How dare you suggest that people at the FBI should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law for, what's that now? For abusing their authority for political ends? What do you, I mean, what's the point of being a top-level official at the FBI if you can't abuse your authority to political ends? The self-own here for MSNBC is glorious. The fact that she's angry and upset and indignant at the mere thought of prosecuting people at the FBI for abusing their authority for political ends, she finds that outrageous, despicable, absolutely disqualifying for Kash Patel. I look at that and I say, well, duh. I've got a better question. Why doesn't our current FBI director prosecute to the fullest extent of the law anyone who has abused their authority for political ends? Well, probably because he'd have to do his own perp walk. That's why. It's just glorious when they do. They are so in their bubble over there in the left-wing media that they have no idea what they're actually admitting to. This man, Kash Patel, is outrageous. He's horrible. Do you know what he wants to do? He wants to prosecute people at the FBI for abusing their authority. It's great. All right, a little bit more of this, and then we'll dive deeper into who Kash Patel is.
And he has said this in the past.
The one thing we learned in the Trump administration the first go around is we got to put in all America patriots top to bottom. And we got them for law enforcement. We got them for intel collection. We got them for offensive operations. We got them for DOD, CIA, everywhere. And the one thing we will do that they never will do is we will follow the facts and the law and go to courts of law and correct these justices and lawyers who have been prosecuting these cases based on politics and actually issuing them as lawfare. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
So again, oh, look at her face. She's got the sad. She finds that outrageous. What did Kash Patel just say that is so outrageous that Nicole Wallace is making that face over? Oh, what a glorious face it is, too. Kash Patel said that they're going to fill the new Trump administration with American patriots. Well, we can't have that. Who will speak for Ukraine? after all. Let alone illegal aliens. American patriots? Wait, Americans? Not just Americans, but Americans who love the country? We can't have that. And then we're going to go after the politicians, the judges who have defied the law and acted in a corrupt way, and people in the media who have lied to help that case. Because understand something. Every single thing that Kash Patel is talking about that needs to get cleaned up in the Justice Department, they're doing it because innocent Americans have been victimized and harmed by the federal government, including with the assistance of people in the media who hide behind the First Amendment and freedom of the press as, in some way, a shield or some sort of cloak of invisibility that allows them to participate in these crimes against American citizens. And yet, well, hey, you know, we're reporters, so, you know, you can't touch us. No, actually, if you violate somebody's civil rights by utilizing the power of the pen, absolutely, you're liable, potentially criminally liable for your behavior. And she finds that objectionable. A little bit more from Nicole Wallace and MSNBC here, and then we'll dive deeper.
They're going to go get the people who lied about the results of the election. We hope he means in 2020, and incited people to commit crimes at the U.S. Capitol. We hope he does that. Anyone that lied about the results of the 2020 election and inspired their own people to carry out crimes and chant, "Hang Mike Pence," those people should meet the fate that Kash Patel describes there in that interview. Spreading.
It will never not amaze me that a woman with a voice like that and a delivery like that is a professional broadcaster in prime time over for NBC News. Think about what she just said, by the way. If protesters were standing in front of the Capitol on January 6th yelling, "Hang Mike Pence," which, by the way, I don't agree with, and I certainly wouldn't do it, but those people should be prosecuted, Nicole Wallace says. That's literally protected First Amendment speech. And of all of the examples that she could just lay out there as a real good gotcha for Kash Patel, it's people standing in front of the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They should be prosecuted, says Nicole Wallace. And that's literally not a crime. All right. So who is Kash Patel? Why do they hate Kash Patel? Well, a couple things about Kash Patel. And first, in the spirit of full disclosure, I know Kash Patel. I've socialized with Kash Patel. I've interviewed him multiple times. And yes, I've been out socially with him. He's a good man. Kash Patel was a former attorney at the Justice Department, so he knows his way around the corridors of power there. He also was the lead investigator for Devin Nunes's House Intelligence Committee. That was the committee that Devin Nunes was the chairman of when they got to the truth about Russian collusion. Kash Patel started peeling back the Russian collusion story and realized exactly what had gone on with James Comey and with the Obama administration in investigating almost everything that we know about the fake FISA warrants that were lied about to be obtained to spy on American citizens, innocent American citizens who were involved in the Trump campaign. And all of the deep, deep corruption involved in the Comey FBI. We know it all because of Kash Patel. After that, he took the job as the assistant, I want to get the title right, forgive me, either assistant chief of staff to the Pentagon, or it may have been the deputy secretary of defense. I'm sorry, for the last year of the Trump administration. Why is his role at the Pentagon important? Because he was literally in the room the week of January 6th, several days before the event at the Capitol, when Donald Trump authorized to the Secretary of Defense the use of National Guard in advance for security at the Capitol. That would be the use of the National Guard that Nancy Pelosi never asked for and refused. Mayor Muriel Bowser of D.C. never asked for and, in fact, refused. Donald Trump pre-authorized those troops days before January 6th. And Kash Patel, he is the primary witness of that. He was in the room when it happened.
Nancy Pelosi and company wanted to turn downtown Washington, D.C. into downtown Kandahar. They literally called, and I was there with the chief, as chief of staff at DOD. They called the SecDef and the chairman, and Pelosi said, "We want tanks." And we said, "What? You want an A1 Abrams tank? Where are we going to put this, Madam Speaker? And are we going to use a tank on American citizens at the United States Capitol? Of course not. So we didn't do it. because it was a disgusting politicization of the day. And it shows you the liars that Nancy Pelosi has now been caught in. And these are the people that wanted to kneecap Donald Trump. It's no different, unfortunately, for guys like Mike Flynn, who were illegally unmasked, and his name was sent to the media, which was a felony to disclose that kind of classified information. And then again, what did they do? Just like they did with impeachment 1, they gave a piece of the transcript so they could target someone politically instead of actually using the Constitution to target criminals. And his life was turned upside down. And it wasn't until 3 years later, when I was the deputy director of national intelligence, that we declassified all the information the FBI withheld from the American public because they exposed their corruption. And in it was Mike Flynn's own innocence. They withheld it from him, just like they did during the Russiagate scandal and the FISA court warrant application for Carter Page. This is the DOJ FBI playbook. They will use government tactics and classification systems to hide their corruption. They've done it for years, and Donald Trump's the only force that can break through it. And so all these things stitched together, they might be different acts in different years, but they are all the same cover-up tactics from these government gangsters. And that's why we got to go out there and give the people the truth. That's what we're about, and that's what we're doing.
That's who Kash Patel is, and that's a little bit of why they don't like him. I forgot that resume credit, by the way, Deputy Director of National Intelligence under Ambassador Richard Grenell when he was the acting Director of National Intelligence. Kash Patel knows where the bodies are buried. He knows exactly what went on. And the last thing they want, the last thing the blob in Washington, D.C. wants, is for Kash Patel to actually come back and have authority. Real fast, one other little item about who Kash Patel is, a recent podcast he participated in.
The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
Yeah, Sean Ryan show. That's who Kash Patel is. So why is the FBI raiding the Polymarket dude today? 2 months before the new administration begins? Well, because when that guy is in charge, should he become the FBI director, and we're just speculating here, we don't know that that's the gig he's going to get. But if he does, well, things are going to change at the FBI. So I guess they're trying to get in all their licks as soon as they can, which brings us to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. You see, we need to get used to them getting in all their licks while they can. And it's not just the FBI and it's not just the Justice Department. It's across the board in this Biden administration. Like I told you yesterday, when they were all shaking hands and smiling in the Oval Office and acting like we're going to have a smooth, peaceful transition of power, behind the scenes, they are already working not only to undermine Donald Trump, but to handcuff him and to force him into a corner so that when he does retain power, he's going to be behind the 8 ball on a lot of major decisions that he wants to make that he told the American people he would make. For instance, one of the biggest promises of the campaign was he was going to mobilize and act to end the war in Ukraine and bring about peace. Anthony Blinken is only the Secretary of State for 2 more months, but boy, oh boy, he hates the idea of peace over in Ukraine. So what did he say today?
As we're working to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself, the United States continues to step up. We've obligated just recently and pushed out the door another $8 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. That was in September. Another almost $500 million just a few weeks ago. And President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
They're saying it out loud. We're going to make sure we push every dollar we can find over to Ukraine before January 20th. They don't care about the election that just occurred. They don't care about the results. They don't care that the American people just voted for fundamental change. They're going to continue going balls to the walls right up until the last minute. It's exactly what Obama did. And I sure hope the Trump people are looking out for it. But ultimately, The idea of Kash Patel as an FBI director kind of makes me all warm and squishy inside. All right, that sounded weird, but that's all I could do. Sorry. All right, moving on. How about that, Nicole Wallace? Where are we going with this?
Chicago.
Oh, yes. Oh, this guy. Okay. The governor of Illinois is Jabba the Hutt. And he said yesterday on Joy... I'm sorry, what? That's not Jabba the Hutt? Boy, that looks like Jabba the Hutt. Oh, apparently his name is Pritzker, and he's a multi-billionaire. They have hotels or something. All right. He could very well be Jabba the Hutt. What he told Joy Reid, though, about what he's going to do as governor of Illinois is, well, borderline treasonous. Watch.
Governor Pritzker, thank you for being here. Let's talk about that. Can the state of Illinois prevent the federal government from building internment camps, aka what they're calling detention facilities in Chicago?
Well, we have prohibited by law in the state of Illinois the use of any of our existing county jails or prisons for the purpose of rounding people up and detaining them. I want to be clear that there are certain circumstances in which the federal government and state governments should work together to allow deportation. An example would be somebody who's been convicted of a violent crime. But they're talking about rounding up people who are law-abiding, undocumented immigrants in this country, many of whom are working, paying taxes, not getting any benefits for those taxes, I might add. And we have a law on the books in the state of Illinois called the Trust Act, which prohibits our local law enforcement and sheriffs and the like from coordinating with the federal authorities. But we cannot prohibit them, federal law enforcement, from coming into our state to conduct raids or do anything else like that. Meanwhile, I think it would be very difficult for them to just spread out across the country. They don't have enough manpower within the Department of Homeland Security in order to carry that out. So, look, I'm going to do everything that I can to protect our undocumented immigrants. They're residents of our state. And I also obviously need to make sure that whatever they're doing in our state, the federal government, that it is actually within federal law or state law for them to do it.
It is.
Okay, so a couple of things of note there. You notice, by the way, we have a law in Illinois. It's called the Trust Act. It prohibits local law enforcement from participating and working with federal law enforcement agencies like ICE. They call it the Trust Act. That's a sanctuary state law. Okay, they've rebranded it. They thought it was beautiful to call it sanctuary state because I guess they were acting like some, person running for sanctuary, like Quasimodo running for sanctuary at a church back in the medieval days or something. Yes, we're going to provide you sanctuary, sanctuary, sanctuary. And of course, once the American people learned what sanctuary city, sanctuary state laws were, we find it odious and find it reprehensible. So the left does what the left always does, which is rebrand it. Affirmative action was obviously odious to the American people because it was racist and discriminatory by giving people of color who were less qualified than somebody who wasn't a person of color a job merely because they were a person of color. So they rebranded affirmative action to DEI. DEI now, of course, is odious to the American people once they learn. So they'll rebrand it to something else. They'll call it unicorns and rainbows or whatever. This is what they do. So they've got a law in Illinois that prohibits local law enforcement from actually working to enforce the law. That's Illinois for you. But this last thing he said is really noteworthy. I want you to listen very, very carefully.
Within the Department of Homeland Security in order to carry that out. So, look, I'm going to do everything that I can to protect our undocumented immigrants. They're residents of our state. And I also obviously need to make sure that
I'm going to do whatever I can to protect what he calls the residents of our state. It's an interesting little catch there. He started to call them undocumented immigrants and then called them the residents of our state. He's going to do whatever he can as governor of Illinois to protect the residents of his state. What about the citizens of your state? What about the law-abiding, legal, tax-paying citizens of your state. Governor Jabba, what's wrong with them? Why won't you extend that same sort of protection to them? So there's your governor of Illinois declaring that he's going to do whatever he can to protect the illegal immigrants in his state. And who is he protecting them from? From federal law enforcement agents. He is protecting them from federal law enforcement. He's aiding and abetting criminals, is what he's doing. And he's bragging about it. And he's celebrated for it. This is Governor Pritzker, Jabba's first big foray into the 2028 presidential election sweepstakes. He wants to go all Howard Taft on us and become the fattest president in American history. Meanwhile, who isn't Governor Pritzker protecting the people of Illinois from? Well, he's not protecting them from actual criminals. He's not protecting them from people who would do citizenship harm. Right now, there are 37 crimes in Chicago for every 1,000 residents. You have a 1 in 27 chance of being the victim of either a violent or a property crime in the city of Chicago. But Governor Jabba's main perspective here and main focus is protecting the illegal immigrants. You know, the people who have already broken federal law. Protect them from law enforcement. Well, what else is going on in Chicago?
Both of the governors behind this effort to push back against the Trump administration's agenda, you mentioned Illinois' J.B. Pritzker and Colorado's Jared Polis, represent sanctuary states where a lot of Democratic voters went for Trump in large part over the issue of immigration.
I am so sorry, boys and girls. We'll start this clip again, but I realized I made a mistake, and I hate making mistakes. His name is J.B. Pritzker, not Jabba. I apologize. You can see how I made that mistake. Wow. Although I don't, do we know what the J.B. stands for? Perhaps it's short for Jabba, because he looks like a Jabba, doesn't he? There's no evidence that shows he is, in fact, a Hutt from the planet Tatooine, although the resemblance is uncanny, which, of course, I think that would make him an alien as well. Legal or illegal, we're not sure, but maybe that's why he wants to protect all of the illegal aliens in his state, because he's one of them. He is, in fact, Jabba, the governor. Sorry. Apparently, it's pronounced JB. I'll try to remember that. It's going to be hard.
Governors behind this effort to push back against the Trump administration's agenda, you mentioned Illinois' J.B. Pritzker and Colorado's Jared Polis, represent sanctuary states where a lot of Democratic voters went for Trump in large part over the issue of immigration. The goal of this new organization, called Governors Safeguarding Democracy, is essentially to create playbooks for how governors across the country can fight against the Trump administration's agenda on everything from immigration and his plans for mass deportations to education and healthcare by using the combined legislative, budgetary, and administrative powers of state leaders.
We are loyal to the Constitution and are loyal to the people of our states. And so this isn't about, creating some massive divide. Indeed, this is just about responding to concerns that governors will have about dealing with what seems to be an onslaught from the new administration.
The timing of this announcement right after the election is notable, given that it's just the latest nationwide initiative from Pritzker to support Democratic Party policies, as he's considered a potential presidential candidate for 2028. But some local Democrats in his own state argue that Pritzker and Governor Jared Polis are ignoring the strong message voters sent last week about the priorities and direction of the Democratic Party.
Clearly, there's a disconnect with the party elite versus the everyday Democrats. We know that messaging from the Democratic Party's elite glitterati failed miserably this 2024. And to think that you can keep replicating that same message and get a better result is just the definition of insanity.
Just looking at Deep Blue, Illinois, this election was the worst performance by a Democratic presidential candidate since Bill Clinton in 1992. And for Donald Trump, it was the best performance for a Republican here since 1988.
Yeah, that's a Chicago alderman you just saw there. He's on the ground in Chicago. He has to actually deal with the fallout of the policies of Jabba Pritzker. Pritzker's, of course, in his mansion in Springfield, far removed from what's going on the ground in Chicago. The alderman has to deal with these nightly meetings where the residents of Chicago are screaming at him because the resources are being taken from their communities, from their children's schools, and given to the illegal immigrants who have taken up residence in that city. And of course, the crime that comes along with it, and the drain of resources, and people living on the sidewalks, and people living on the streets. And well, it's a place run by Democrats. And Jabba looks at all of that and recognizes that the real problem is Donald Trump and federal immigration enforcement officers. And he's going to do whatever he can. How did he put it? I'll do whatever I can, everything in my power to protect the illegal immigrants. You never hear him say that he'll do everything in his power to protect the tax-paying citizens of Chicago or the state of Illinois. That doesn't get you on Joy Reid's show. That doesn't get you the nomination for president for the Democratic Party. I'm sure that one upside of all this is that Jabba Pritzker and Democrats like him are incredibly popular with illegal immigrants, right? I mean, that's the play here. We let all these people into the country. We say that we're going to protect them. That virtue signaling brings us some votes from elitists who live on the East Coast and the West Coast behind their armed, guard, protected, gated communities so that they can make themselves feel better by voting for the little people who need some help so that they can stay in the country illegally and cut their lawns and take out their garbage and bust their tables and deliver their food and maybe even raise their children, because who wants to deal with all the ickiness of toddlers, right? And then I guess they think that eventually these illegal immigrants will either vote illegally for them or they'll get amnesty and citizenship and be oh so grateful to Jabba Pritzker and all the Democrats like him for protecting them while they were in the country illegally. So if anyone's happy about it, it's the illegal immigrants, right? Well, CNN went and found some illegal immigrants and asked them about that. Let's see what they had to say.
If you get deported, would you regret your support to Donald Trump?
No me arrepentiría.
He's saying that he wouldn't regret supporting Donald Trump. So you're really not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about your children and the future of your children.
Yes, I want the better for my children.
The illegal immigrant supports Donald Trump, and if he gets deported, he won't regret that support because he's thinking about a bigger picture here than just himself. The illegal immigrant gets it. The illegal immigrant is, frankly, in this case, more in tune with the American people and the voters and the sentiment and the rule of law than the governor of Illinois, who, if you missed it, is now a leading candidate for president for 2028. And don't forget his name. It's Jabba.
Larry, can we go through some super chats real quick?
Absolutely, Kevin. You can interrupt me anytime you want. You know that. Angela for $5. Fear not, America. I love that image. Is that Jesus behind Donald Trump? I love the artistry. My top 3 for press secretary: Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and Larry O'Connor. Thoughts? No, I think I speak for all 3 of those people when I say it would be a thrill to do it for one day, but not on an everyday basis. I would not want that job. It would be a blast for one day. But hopefully there's more qualified people for that job than us. I'd rather talk to you guys every day than talk to members of the press. A Piaman, $10. Thank you. Love. Great job, Larry. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And we love you right back. Kilowatt 420, dude, right? Am I right? $9.99. Thank you, sir. We will put your $9.99 to good use, although not in a 420 kind of way. Angela for $2. The America U.S. First MAGA Dream Team by Swamp Snakes. Yeah, we are seeing a pretty amazing cabinet being put together, aren't we, Angela? Thank you so much for all that. We love your super chats. We really appreciate your generosity. It is incredibly touching for us to receive those super chats. But the extent of the generosity that we would really love to get from you is the thumbs up, the likes, the subscribes, and the recommendations. When you share our links, it does a lot, not just for our credibility and our our strength within the social media biosphere, but it also puts us in front of people that have never seen us before. And it's weird. Like when people see our show, they tend to like it and become regular viewers. So liking, subscribing, and sharing across platforms really goes a long way. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Our colleague Guy Benson over at townhall.com has a fascinating breakdown of some new data coming out of the 2024 election that we want to share with you. You know Guy Benson, he's on Fox News all the time. He does a radio show for Fox News Radio, and he is the political director, I think is his title, and has been at Town Hall. Guy and Katie Pavlich and I and Derek Hunter and Kurt Schlichter, and we're sort of the columnists there at townhall.com. And take a look at this article from Guy. The New York Times post-election focus group of young voters is brutal for the media and incredible for J.D. Vance. That's right. For J.D. Vance. We're going to go through this together. It's a great article, and I implore you to go to Town Hall and check it out yourself. While you're there, by the way, you should become a subscriber of Town Hall, a VIP subscriber. You'll get an ad-free experience. You'll get content that you don't get unless you're a VIP member. And you support the quality of our journalism that we try to strive for every single day. This sort of thing doesn't happen just from ad sales, sadly. We do need your support through the VIP program. If you use my name, you'll get 50% off over there at townhallvip.com. Just use my name, Larry. And this allows us to sort of bypass the gatekeepers at big tech and Google and all the places that we rely on right now for ad revenue. The sooner we don't need their ad revenue, the more independent we get and we can stay so we can continue doing the work we do. So while we're going through this column, if you don't mind, go ahead and become a member of Town Hall VIP. All right, let's go through it together. The New York Times engaged in a regular, if sporadic, conversation with 13 young undecided voters over the course of the 24 election cycle, the oldest of whom was 27. 2 of them ended up supporting Kamala Harris. 7 voted for Trump. The rest supported other candidates or wrote in different options. Over the course of a wide-ranging post-election discussion with this group, a few themes emerged. First, the word phony was applied to Harris over and over again. Another voter called her campaign empty. Second, much of the support for Trump was grudging or reluctant, but his voters ultimately pulled the trigger for him, often despite a sense that they were heavily outnumbered within their social groups. And third, while Tim Walz was barely mentioned by anyone at all, though several mentions of Josh Shapiro not being the pick suggest dissatisfaction with Walz, Trump's running mate was mentioned a lot. When Vance was selected by Trump at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, many people were critical of the choice. I saw it as a mixed bag and said so publicly. Vance didn't have the smoothest rollout, struggled to find his footing in the early days, and was welcomed into the race with historically poor favorability numbers. That's right. Remember this? First, the headlines that came from the mainstream media, the legacy media, I should say, because they're anything but mainstream. I say mainstream just because it's sort of a catchphrase that we've always used, but they're not the mainstream. We are. But here's how the legacy corporate brands described the pick of J.D. Vance. You'll remember, nobody likes Vance. I bet even Trump can't stand him. J.D. Vance is more unpopular than Sarah Palin. Well, I like Sarah Palin. Everyone hates J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance breaks polling records in the worst way. That's right. Look at the favorable unfavorables. These are the view of J.D. Vance. If you're a Harris supporter, you found him unfavorable by the tune of 89%. And if you were a Trump supporter, you found him unfavorable by the tune of 8%. So really the views broke down party lines. And surprise, surprise, if you like Kamala Harris, you didn't like J.D. Vance. Okay, that's how they covered it. Also, over on CNN, Harry Enton did his data dive, and here's how he covered it.
He does worse in his home region at minus 16 points than he does in the average of all polls, which is a minus 5-point net favorability rating. So the people who know him best, the region that knows him best, they like him even less than America likes him. And of course, as you pointed out, again, in that kind intro, is he is historically unpopular for a VP nominee coming out of his first convention as a VP.
All right, so let's specifically look at some former Republican presidential candidates. What do you see?
Yeah, you know, you mentioned Sarah Palin. How about Dan Quayle as well? These are 2 folks who I think most people remember as not being particularly popular. The amazing thing was coming out of their conventions, they actually were pretty popular. Quayle with a plus 15-point net favorability rating. Sarah Palin with a plus 26-point net favorability rating.
Of course they were popular. I remember both of these nominations, and people loved them. In fact, Sarah Palin was probably the best thing that happened to John McCain's campaign against Barack Obama. She actually buoyed John McCain for the first time in September to rise above Barack Obama for the first time in that entire election season. Yes, coming out of the nominations and the selections, they were incredibly popular. What happened? Well, the media destroyed them. The media went out of their way to lie about them, slime them, set them up, mischaracterize them, and destroyed their characters. It's so funny. Well, people don't think of them as very popular. Well, no, we thought of them as very popular until you started lying about them and engaging in the politics of personal destruction. The interesting thing about J.D. Vance is that they went all in and tried to characterize J.D. Vance as this evil, horrible, stupid, offensive person. And then, well, something started to change. We'll get to that in a second, but watch how they characterize J.D. Vance. This was just back in July when CNN had this report.
Again, Vance at minus 5 points is just off the charts and falling off the chart in the wrong direction. Not up above the chart, but down below the chart. The fact is, he is historically unpopular, even more so than VP nominees, who, of course, went on to infamy, at least in
Well, I
terms
mean,
of
right.
their
So you look
candidacy.
at what happened to those two, and they plunged. Some may say, well, maybe there's nowhere to go but up for Vance, but in margins, that's not true. It can get worse.
It
and
can
worse.
get
I just
definitely
don't know
worse.
which way it will go. All right. So when this comes to the broader country, you talked about how the area that knows him best right now in the favorability likes him least, but undecided voters. That's what this is about. There are more of them than a lot of people care to admit.
Yeah.
And prior to the seismic shift in the race, many of them may have gone for Trump.
Could have.
Now, who knows what they're going to do? How does Vance play there?
He doesn't play well with them at all. His favorable rating is just 5%. Just 5% hold a favorable rating. 29% hold an unfavorable rating. That makes a net favorability rating of minus 24 points. That's worse than his net favorability ratings overall. The fact is, if undecided voters are going to make up their mind based upon J.D. Vance, they're going to make it and make the choice for Kamala Harris.
All right. So it's sort of no surprise that at the time, most of the lame brains in the legacy media all started singing from the same choir book and all started with the same narrative that J.D. Vance was a huge mistake and was going to ruin any chance that Donald Trump may have had to win the presidency, right? And by the way, don't forget, this was also right around the time that they were installing Kamala Harris as the nominee, right? That all happened after J.D. Vance's speech at the Republican National Convention. That's when Biden stepped down. That's when they installed Kamala. So they were really trying to do this big narrative. It's like, oh, J.D. Vance is the first new name in this election cycle. He's a stinker. Here comes Kamala. Brat Summer. Woo! Well, that didn't work out very well. And that's where we pick up Guy Benson's article today at Town Hall. Then things started to change. Vance hit a stride. He found his voice. He thrived during media interviews in which he was very focused and conversant, ran circles around journalists, and did so without coming across as too aggressive or dour. His big breakout was the vice presidential debate, which drew high ratings and allowed him to dispel the weird right-wing gargoyle image that Democrats and media had been painting for months. The weird descriptor, ironically, was coined by Tim Walz, which helped earn Walz an inside track on Terrace's ticket. Oops, Vance clearly won the debate, and his favorability jumped dramatically among those who watched it. By the end of the campaign, he pulled off quite an impressive feat, given where he'd started back in July, which brings us to, here we go. This is the end where the higher favorability rating for Tim Walz, according to CNN exit polls, ended up turning around for Vance. So you see the November 6th view of J.D. Vance, again, for Harris, unfavorable 89. The totals are 47 favorable, 46 unfavorable. Look at Tim Walz, 45 favorable, 47 unfavorable, right? So in other words, Tim Walz had a higher unfavorable rating or a lower favorable rating than J.D. Vance. In fact, Vance had a net +1 favorable over unfavorable, and people viewed Tim Walz as a net -2 unfavorable to favorable. In fact, if you go further into the exit polls from CNN, Donald Trump had a favorable 46 to 53. Kamala Harris had a favorable 47 to 52. Tim Walz favorable 45 to 47, and Vance had a favorable 47 to 46. In other words, of the four candidates, Trump, Harris, Walz, and Vance, Vance is the only one of the four that had a net favorable rating at the end of the day. Phenomenal. Amazing. How did he turn things around? He performed. He did interviews and did them well. His superb debate showing seems to have actually mattered. And the coterie of young voters the Times tracked gave him rave reviews. Here's a sampling of some of these young, again, these are young voters from 18 to 27 that the New York Times tracked during the entire campaign. I can't believe it, but I did end up voting for Donald Trump, said Abigail, a 23-year-old Virginian who backed Mr. Biden last time. She felt Mr. Trump was a strong leader, liked his choice of J.D. Vance, and felt Democrats made assumptions based on gender. I made that decision when I saw J.D. Vance's interview with the New York Times. He is the future of the Republican Party. I'm more voting for Vance than I am for Trump. George, 21, out of Georgia, said, I was really impressed with J.D. Vance, especially during the VP debate. McLean, 25, from District of Columbia. I was so impressed by J.D. Vance, the way he carried himself and how normal he appeared. I think that Donald Trump or J.D. Vance would go on Joe Rogan regularly. Even one voter who ultimately didn't end up pulling the lever for Trump said Vance's inclusion on the ticket tempted her. Laura, 20 years old in Maryland. You notice they're all in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. Hey, guys, get out of the bubble. Go interview someone from Oklahoma. God, they're just so boring and predictable. We just followed these random 20-something voters. They just happen to live right here within a 10-mile radius of the New York Times, Washington, D.C. bureau. God, no wonder the American people hate the New York Times. Laura, 20 years old in Maryland, said, I did consider voting for Trump when I saw Vance. I hope to see more of him in the future. An incredible political turnaround, although it's not something that we should be very surprised at. J.D. Vance has been fighting uphill his entire life, right? Anyone who knows his story from Hillbilly Elegy, the book, as well as the Netflix movie, knows that he's got good character. He's got resilience. He doesn't pay attention to negativity. In fact, he thrives on it, focuses it, and then just strives to improve every single day, you know, sort of like a typical American. He has confidence in who he is and what he believes. And when faced with adversity and lies, he just gave that iconic meme look from the debate and spoke the truth from his heart. And strangely, the American people seem to like that. So who'd have thought it several months ago when the tickets were set that when all was said and done, the most popular and highly favored candidate of all four on the national ticket would be none other than your new vice president-elect, J.D. Vance. And if you're a Republican, and that's the case right now, well, you're pretty happy because he's the vice president. He serves one term, and then we've got a presidential election in 2028. He's a young man, and he is right now the most popular national figure in American politics. That's not a bad place to be. That was a whole lot of talking there, Kevin. You set me up for a lot of talking in that segment.
That's what the people want.
Is that what people want? They don't want me calling J.B. Pritzker Jabba the Hutt? I think they want that.
That counts as talking.
I guess it does. Do other people call him Jabba, by the way, considering his initials are JB? Or did I just like start that trend myself?
No, I've never heard that before. That's a
All right,
Larry O'Connor original.
If you hear anybody else calling JB Pritzker Jabba Pritzker. By the way, you know what else I invented? You ever hear anybody calling Gavin Newsom Governor Hair Gel? I started that. That was mine. I used to do a radio show on KABC in Los Angeles, and I started calling him Governor Hair Gel, and now everyone calls him Governor Hair Gel. Just saying. We've mentioned before that the biggest loser coming out of last week's presidential election was, well, Kamala Harris. My God, what a soul-destroying defeat. I mean, absolute, total humiliation. Awful. Just the worst, right? But even beyond her, probably the biggest loser was the corporate-owned legacy media. You know, the same media that continues to get it wrong election cycle after election cycle after election cycle, who continue to live in their bubbles in Washington, D.C. and in New York, and they refuse to even allow your opinion, your voice, your perspective, your point of view to be seen or heard on their little panels, right? Or if they let one person on, it's 8-1, right? I mean, a perfect example of this is the daytime ABC news program known as The View. We all know The View. We love The View. We talk about The View all the time. We like to hate watch The View. And I love to remind everybody that The View is, in fact, an ABC news program. No, it's not part of the daytime television unit, you know, the unit at ABC that covers soap operas and game shows. No. And it's not ABC Entertainment. No, that's for prime time, right? No, it's part of ABC News. Whoopi Goldberg is just like George Stephanopoulos or David Muir. They're all part of the same family. They all do the same job. And it's pretty impressive that they call themselves The View, because on that show and at that table in that room, only one view is allowed. And their viewers only saw one view. And that was the propaganda from Kamala Harris's campaign and the Democrat Party. That was it. That was The View. And they've told their viewers that any other view is not only not welcome, but frankly is considered racist, bigoted, and completely out of bounds for polite conversation. Until now, apparently. Eric Daugherty is an assistant news director over at Florida Voice News. He covers elections there, and he is hearing from his sources that ABC is looking to bring in a pro-Trump voice to The View and other shows. He's quoting this also from reporting at the New York Post. They're actually trying to find room at the table for a woman sitting on The View that is pro-Trump. I'm curious who you think that person should be. It's got to be a woman, because The View is really only women allowed because, you know, inclusion and diversity. Who would you wish this upon? Who do you think should walk into that gaggle of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be polite without being polite. Let's just say angry women. Who would you wish this about? I'd love to hear it down in the comments or in the live chat. Who do you think would be the perfect woman to be a regular pro-Trump voice on The View? I can think of a lot. I've got a lot of friends who would be great at it, but I wouldn't wish it on any of them. They're better than that. And frankly, the inclusion of a pro-Trump voice on The View would only serve to actually boost that show's ratings and actually keep Joy Behar and Sonny Hostin employed for that much longer. And that's the last thing we want. I think The View should stay exactly the way it is so it can die a miserable, well-deserved death. That said, they're looking to spice things up. And listen, a good 7-figure deal for a conservative woman who is pro-Trump, you know, that would be a nice gig. So who do you think it should be? Let us know downstairs. The View, though, is not the only media entity that's facing an existential crisis right now because of the results of the last election. Take a look at this graphic, also courtesy of Eric Daugherty. Apparently, the primetime viewership for MSNBC is down 53% in the last week. 53%. That's more than half, boys and girls. Meanwhile, Fox is up about 20%. Now, part of this, of course, is because the MSNBC viewership was, well, stringing along through the campaign and hoping for the best, that their side would win. And by the way, the primetime hosts on MSNBC, from Rachel Maddow to Chris Hayes to Larry O'Donnell to Joy Reid, et cetera, they were all delivering happy talk to their viewers. Oh, Kamala's got this. Oh, sure, the polls say that it's close, but we've got a blue wall and she's going to make history. And so, of course, everybody's eating their popcorn and getting excited about their team, right? And then when their team loses, well, they're depressed and they don't want to keep tuning in because the news is bad news, number one. But number two, and I think more importantly, is that there's been a little bit of trust damaged between the news outlet, MSNBC, and their viewers. See, if you're watching and you're hearing from the smartest people in the room, like Joe and Mika and Rachel Maddow, that Trump's going to lose and there's no way he can win, and then suddenly Trump wins, well, why would you keep going back to that network to get the news? Because they are wrong. They are consistently wrong. And suddenly you start hearing people on that news network saying, well, yeah, people voted about the economy. And, we do have a problem on the border. And, ultimately they didn't do this. And maybe Joe Biden should have quit earlier. And maybe this and maybe that. And you're like, hey, where the hell were you for the last 3 months telling me all of this? I relied on you for news, for information, for analysis, for perspective. Up until the loss, you never told me how bad the economy was. Up until the loss, you didn't tell me that the border was a real problem. Now you're saying it? Well, if you're in the business of news, even if you're giving your opinion while delivering the news, you've got to have credibility. That's why sometimes I tell you things you probably don't want to hear me say. But it's because I have to have credibility with you. So now MSNBC is down 53%. And let me tell you something. I think it's even worse than that. You know why? Because on election night and the day after election, and even a couple of days leading up to the election, I know for a fact that pro-Trump conservatives, we were watching MSNBC because it was fun. We were watching it because we wanted to see their miserable defeat. MSNBC actually had a spike on election night. They actually, for the first time, had better viewership than CNN on an election night. Why? Because a whole bunch of conservatives were watching it and laughing at their meltdown. That's why. They got a bunch of viewers not because they liked the programming, but because we wanted to mock them. So I'm guessing the drop is even worse than that because the numbers on election night were inflated a little bit bigger than they should have been. How bad are the primetime ratings right now at MSNBC? Break it down by show. Joy Reid is down 54.6%. Ari Melber, whoever that is down 49.6%. Chris Hayes, 47.2%. Alex Wagner, 53.6%. Morning Joe is down nearly 40 points from Election Day. Stephanie Rule, 67%. And Andrea Mitchell is down 39.7%. That's absolutely devastating. In fact, it's gotten so bad that on the quarterly earnings call for Comcast Universal, the CEO of Comcast, the corporation that owns MSNBC, made public their plans to sell off the cable news network. That's right. MSNBC is going to be sold. Who knows what the new branding will be? Who knows whether they'll be able to keep the name or the graphics or the peacock, since it's not going to be owned or affiliated with NBC anymore. In fact, there's already speculation that a conservative outlet could buy it. Jeremy Boring, the Grand Poobah, God King is his title over at Daily Wire. He's floated the idea that they might buy it. Dave Rubin, our fellow colleague and podcaster, has suggested that he has a plan to purchase it. Even Jack Posobiec over at Human Events has suggested maybe they'll gobble up the cable network. I don't know why anyone would buy it. I mean, I guess they've got equipment and some infrastructure, and maybe having access to cable lineups is worth something. Maybe some investors could come in and restab. Maybe we should call it Town Hall. It's a thought. Either way, it is for sale. We'll see if anyone wants to buy it or not. Meanwhile, things aren't that much better over at CNN. According to, is it Punchbowl? No, Puck News. According to Puck News, got to be careful how I say that. CNN plans a huge round of layoffs at the end of this year. By the way, real fast, just so you know, this is not uncommon in media companies, especially after a presidential election. There's a lot of hiring that goes on during a presidential election year. And then after the election, there's a lot of layoffs that happen. And it's happening in many aspects of the media, including my medium, talk radio, in Los Angeles at KFI, in New York at WOR, and various other stations around the country. There are layoffs happening. Thankfully, not at my radio station in Washington, D.C. I think that's because there's no one left to lay off. But there are a lot of layoffs in the media world. CNN, though, apparently is going through a devastating cost-cutting spree because they didn't quite get the ratings and revenue they were banking on this election year. According to Puck News, top stars are going to be laid off and hundreds of people will be fired. CNN is reportedly set to fire some of its top talent in a round of post-election layoffs. You know, Anderson Cooper makes $20 million a year. I just want CNN to know that I will do Anderson Cooper's job for half that. You're welcome. The rumblings, first reported by Puck News, came as high-paid personalities like Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer were reportedly recently denied raises. Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine anybody who deserves a raise more than Jake Tapper. I mean, let's face it, he's going to be really busy during the Trump administration, repeating lies and anonymous leaks. I mean, that's not an easy job. The two already boast salaries of $7 million and $3 million, respectively, while stars like Anderson Cooper take home an annual $20 million. Caitlin Collins and Aaron Burnett also command inflated earnings, $3 million and $6 million apiece, respectively. Insiders told Puck the new round of firings will likely see on-air talent like them affected as the network's new CEO looks to free up finances amid waning ratings. Aw, couldn't have happened to a nicer group. I think CNN could be fixed. MSNBC is a lost cause, right? I mean, they staked their claim. They decided they were going to be the liberal version of Fox, which is boring, but they went ahead and did it. And they've got a very narrow viewership, mostly in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, but not really much beyond that. Sort of like the Democratic Party and the Democrat candidate. It's fine, I suppose, but it's not enough to sustain an entire network. CNN still has a chance, I think, for a couple of reasons. First of all, CNN has an established brand that people remember from the good old days. It's where you would go for news, right? And then they got into the opinion business. Now, there was a time when CNN first ventured into the opinion business, and they were the place for debate. They had TV shows like Crossfire or The Capitol Gang and a couple of others that involved valid and well-informed debaters on both sides of the issue, the conservative side and the liberal side, and they would bring in guests and they would challenge each other. And if you liked healthy, intellectual, political debates, sometimes with some fireworks, CNN was the place for you. I used to watch those shows, and they had very credible voices, conservative voices that would represent my point of view and my perspective. Those voices are gone now. CNN doesn't have those voices on the air, even as guests, really, let alone as hosts of their own show. Yes, I know they've got Scott Jennings and they've got maybe one or two other conservatives who are trying to do their best, but for the most part, they're nowhere near what they used to be. CNN has a chance. Like I said, MSNBC is your liberal network. Fox News, for better or worse, I guess has continued to emerge as the conservative network. CNN could be the network for political debate. They could mix up their primetime shows with a liberal host for the 8 o'clock hour, and then they could have, a 9 o'clock conservative host a show. And it'd be interesting to see how the ratings go and which shows do better. The people will decide who they want to watch. They could gobble up a former Fox News host or somebody from Newsmax, or discover somebody who streams and give them a primetime show. Why not? I mean, you can't do any worse than you've done, can you? See, nobody is going to buy CNN trying to go back to its roots and saying, all right, we're out of the opinion business. We're just going to deliver the news now, because it's still going to be news delivered by Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer. Well, we know who you are. I'm sorry. You've done the Tom Cruise thing where you take the rubber mask off. We know exactly who you are. You can't now pretend that you're just going to deliver the news and the facts. Fine. Own your opinions. Just counterbalance those opinions with me and with other conservatives who can engage in a debate, either one-on-one on the same show or independently. Have your Anderson Cooper liberal hour and then have your Larry O'Connor conservative hour, or someone else. It doesn't have to be me. I'm just doing that as an example. I'm not looking for a gig, I promise. But that actually could be interesting. That could be a lively cable news channel that doesn't take sides all the way in one direction or the other, but actually offers to the audience both perspectives in a highly informed, energetic, and entertaining way, and then let the people decide. I would watch a good liberal cable news show if I knew that that host didn't hate me. That's all I ask. And I think you'd do the same. CNN could totally save themselves if they want to. And the fact that they don't, well, sort of tells you they don't. Quick story, just between us. I got a phone call yesterday from a guy I used to work with. He used to be a radio producer in New York. And before I got my job in DC, I used to be like a guest host. You know, a lot of radio hosts, before they get a permanent gig, they're guest hosts for holidays, whatever, vacations. So I used to be a guest host for a prominent talk radio station in New York, and I knew this guy as a producer. Now, subsequently, he left there and became a producer at CNN. He worked on various day parts at CNN, and now he works for one of the primetime shows. And he calls me out of the blue. I'm like, wow, I haven't heard from this guy in a while. So I called it, picked up the phone. We start chatting, and he's like, listen, we're looking to expand our perspectives on the show, and we were just wondering if you were available to, do some panels with us and maybe do some guest hits on the show on CNN. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah. We're really looking to sort of bring in some more pro-Trump voices and let them be heard, and, make sure that everybody's opinion is being reflected. And this guy's a good guy, by the way. It's not him, right? And I'm thinking to myself, geez, what took you so long, CNN, to think that maybe that's something you should be doing for your viewers, to not repel people and basically pretend like anyone who doesn't agree with your host is a pariah that should be avoided on Thanksgiving dinner? So I was talking to him, and I said, well, listen, I'd love to do that, but I do the morning show now, which means I got to wake up at like 3:15 in the morning. So it's kind of hard for me to do prime time, but listen, maybe on a Friday or something, I'll do that. So I might. I haven't decided yet. In fact, if you think I should do a CNN hit, let me know. When he does call me back, though, and asks if I can go on CNN, I'm going to say, oh, great, that's cool. What are you paying? And just wait for the pause. You see, unless you're actually hired as a contributor at a cable news network, if you're just a guest to lend your opinion, you don't get paid anything. I used to do that a lot at Fox News. It's good for your visibility. It's fun. I used to go on Tucker's show a lot. I used to do Red Eye with Greg Gutfeld. I used to do Shannon Bream's show quite a bit. Back when I wasn't doing mornings, I would be on Fox and Friend. There's clips of me out there. You can see it. I used to like doing that, and it's good exposure, and it's fun to hang out at Fox News with people that you know and you like. But I'll be honest. After a while, it becomes a grind. And doing it for free, well, you really have to evaluate what you're getting out of it, right? Fox News has called me subsequently, and honestly, I haven't been available or have done anything with Fox News in a while because it's just a pain, to be honest, if you're not getting paid. Now, I'm fortunate, and I don't mean to sound like I'm a snob or anything, but I don't really need the exposure at this point. But CNN, if CNN calls me and asks me to do a free hit on their network, why in the hell would I do it? First of all, who's watching CNN right now? And even if I do it, do you realize how damaged that brand is for my audience, for my following? At this point, if you're a conservative and you show up on CNN, you're viewed with some level of suspicion. Why are you going on that channel, right? I mean, Scott Jennings is there, but he does get paid. That's his gig. CNN hired him to do that. And if they're looking to pay me, I will consider it. Even then. Oh, one other item about the death of the media after last week's election. Check this out. Not only is MSNBC's ratings in the toilet and they're for sale, not only is CNN's ratings in the toilet and now they're facing layoffs and looking to expand their audience by bringing people like me in. One other thing, the Washington Post, the owner of the Washington Post, is now apparently telling the newspaper that they have to add more conservative opinion writers at the paper. That's according to the New York Post. Wow. Yeah, that'll do it. I know I'll start subscribing to the Washington Post if they start having columns by anyone other than Jennifer Rubin. Or maybe I won't. Maybe you should do what I do. Stick with Town Hall and all of our websites. Hot Air, Red State, PJ Media, Twitchy, Owen Town Hall, Owen Bearing Arms. We have so many great websites, I forget them. All right, you guys, did we get any more super chats in there, Kevin? Kevin, Fofevin?
Yes, we did.
Hey, what do you think of that story? I didn't tell you that story. What do you think of that? That guy, the producer reaching out to me from CNN. Isn't that funny?
I think your analysis is right, and I'm not sure what amount of money it would take to be lectured by Abby Phillip.
Oh, I know what amount of money. Hold on. I'm not saying there isn't an amount of money. I just don't think they're willing to pay it. Angela, another $2. We are MAGA voters in Oklahoma. Is that a problem? That's not a problem at all. We love Oklahoma. Angela, did you know that my in-laws are in Oklahoma? I married an Oklahoma girl. That's right. My amazing wife Meredith is from Oklahoma, and we spend a lot of time in Oklahoma, so maybe I'll see you around at Brahms. Oh, I love a good Brahms cheeseburger. Angela, our favorite show used to be Hannity and Colmes. They were fire. Absolutely. See, I love a great debate show. Can I just say, and this, Sean Hannity is a very nice guy, and I've met him several times. I don't mean this as a insult, but I actually thought Hannity was better when he was on Hannity and Colmes. I used to do Alan Colmes's radio show on Sirius or on Fox News Radio before he passed away. He's actually a sweet guy, believe it or not. I agree with you, Angela. I used to love Hannity and Colmes too, and I used to love Crossfire. I love debate shows. All right, is that good? We're good. All right, guys. Hey, thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. A special Friday edition of the show tomorrow. Looking forward to it as well. In the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor. Wait. I forgot to tell you. Are you still there? Everyone still there? We're coming out with Larry mugs. Larry Show coffee mugs, my friends. And you're going to be able to buy that merch on the YouTube portal and I think over at the Rumble portal too. If you want a Larry branded mug, let us know in the comments and we'll make sure that we reach out and get it to you. All right. We're selling Larry branded mugs in the Town Hall store. They're not up there yet, are they, Kevin?
I don't think so. Coming soon.
I don't think they're there yet, but they're going to be there pretty soon, just in time for Christmas. Because who doesn't want a Larry mug? It's weird, though, because I think that if you bring it to the workplace, they're going to think that there's like a new hire. Hey, who's this Larry guy? It's all right. And then if somebody says that and you're walking around the office with the mug that says Larry, and they say, what's that? I thought your name was Jim. And you just look at them and say, you can call me Larry. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.